Definitely. I mean, it's a great point, Ty, because, like you're saying, there are these silos in medicine. So when you go into the patient's chart, in whatever electronic medical record system you're in, you have to go through so many different tabs just to kind of find the information. And, the different people that touch the chart, have different forms or formats that they, enter data in, whether it's the clinician or the nurse or the physician's assistant. They're all critical of providing inputs into the system. But then, like you're saying, it's so fragmented. I think that's a really great value for data scientists to be able to piece it together using the guidance and direction of a clinician that actually can understand where this data in this context can predict something really important, like you're mentioning with the usage of ventilators or the needs, so that hospitals can plan for surges of COVID-19 or whatever it is. I think that's really an important point.
I wanted to do one more thing. Can I dovetail off that a bit, or should we move to a question?
Oh no, please, yeah, go ahead.
So part of my staff radiology time was doing tumor board for breast cancer. And I personally never did any other cancer tumor boards, only breast. And so I'm gonna assume that it's similar for other ones. And so, and please correct me, Chirag, if I'm not correct. But ultimately, I would get a list on Monday and say on Friday, present these 8 people at tumor board. And what that means to the non-clinicians on the call is I would need to take those list of people and make kind of like a PowerPoint of like, this is what it looked like before we found a cancer. This is where we did the biopsy. This is what it looked like after. Maybe we did some treatment. Did it respond to that? And so I literally just show the pictures and say what happened. And I use my little draggy thing where I drag, it's 1.2 centimeters, which is ridiculous, but that's a whole other thing. And then after I finish talking, then the pathologist says, well, when they took it out, it measured 2 centimeters. And this is what I looked under the microscope and I did my stains and this is what it was. And then in my tumor boards, literally like these super smart people would just, yes, that's a stage X. And they look in the book like, okay, this is what we're gonna do, any clinical trials. And I'm sitting there shaking my head. I'm like, honestly, like this is the best that we can do. This is the best that we can do. So I propose something like this along the same lines as that Google Analytics. Is like, I measure all the things on my computer and that gets sent to some asynchronous cloud where the pathologist does the same thing. And all that stuff is run on some sort of database. And then the super smart oncologist and radiation oncologist and the case manager all look at that asynchronously and say, all right, Steve, we don't need to wait till Friday to start your therapy because we have all the information right here. And not only do we not have to wait, we probably have much better information because we have it segmented for you as an individual. So tumor board is something that you can clearly see I have strong feelings about because that is ripe for improvement. Now, possibly at Stanford, you guys have like a legit system, like it's awesome, but I don't, that is definitely not standard of care across the entire United States and probably the world. And so I would like to plant that seed and also get some feedback if you have other areas that you think need improvement in that same tumor board realm.
I think that's a great point. In fact, at 1 o'clock today, we have our neuro-oncology tumor board, so I'll be leaving for that. And just like you described, we all get in a room, of course, now it's virtually through Zoom, but we have all of our colleagues, like our radiology colleagues or, pathology, just as you mentioned, radiation oncology, medical oncology, and we discuss, kind of in piecemeal, each of the components of the patient's case, and then have a discussion about what to do. And there's some interesting literature coming out of the neuro-oncology branch of the NIH, where they incorporate another screen into the room, which is tracking the patient's symptoms. And I think that was kind of very interesting as well, because they found that, in addition to the trends in the MRI scan of the brain and the trends in blood counts or whatever it may be, the trends in the patient's self-reported quality of life or their symptoms could maybe even be as good, if not better, predictors of morbidity or mortality than our current standards of data that we incorporate into our tumor board. So I think that's a really important point. And I really like how you mentioned that if you could, have all the experts upload their expert data and information asynchronously into a central, cloud database, then you can actually move forward the patient's care a lot quicker, not have to wait for these weekly tumor board meetings. And that could just be more of like a rubber stamp of approval for what you already decided earlier in the week, but you kind of get the ball rolling earlier for your patients. I think that's great.
And I mean, I've seen a few things in the literature that talk about really capturing patient wearables, like Fitbits or whatever. Mm-hmm. And that's another neat thing too. Like if someone is in like week 2 of chemotherapy and they're like moving around more, that's information that you would never really have captured. And we don't care if they did 4,000 steps or 5,200 steps, but if they used to do 2,000, that's important information to know. And so we're as an industry, medical industry, we're quick to dismiss the patient data just because we don't see like the literal value of the steps. But to me, I think it's the trends, and that would be really cool to see. And I mean, I think the patient would feel like they're more engaged. Like, hey, look at my Fitbit. I guess they care what I'm doing. I don't know. I'm speculating there, but I think they're at least worth digging into.
Yeah, it's really important because, like you're saying, you could even have envision like if there's this kind of central cloud that has the data, you could perhaps have multiple viewers, or even kind of say, here's the clinician's view of the data, and here's the patient's view, or something like that. So they're all contributing, to forwarding the patient's care. And like you said, a lot of times when patients, feel that they're in it and they're part of it, what they're doing on a daily basis is contributing to their well-being. Who knows what component of benefit that provides as well. So I think there's a lot of stuff we can still learn from all these emerging data points and technologies.
In addition to just the reliable access to the clinical data from a patient-facing tumor board, we can also do a couple of different things. One is with natural language processing, we can translate doctor talk to what humans really understand. And particularly with the crazy markers that are out there nowadays from the pathologist, and it's really tricky to, I mean, even for me, like from the breast lesions, there would be sometimes I have to Google. I'm like, wait, what were those markers? And so I needed to understand those too. So I just feel for the patients who sure can log into their patient portal, but then it's like, oh great, what am I supposed to do with this? And so if we add a layer to help patients and families kind of deconstruct that, and I mean, really, there's only a fixed number of cancers. I mean, mostly, and there's a bell curve, and most people have the ones in the middle, and so it wouldn't be that hard to make a real patient portal that was like usable and friendly. And so I would add one more use case for AI to apply NLP to doctor to translate to human.